Well, welcome everybody. We are back. We are here. Welcome to my crypt for another amazing episode, another great show, and another great interview. As I said, I love to bring everybody great interviews and interviews that you can learn from and maybe open your eyes a little bit. That's what I really like doing. And a topic that I've been looking into probably for years now to a certain degree has been geoengineering. And some people call them chemtrails, whatever you want to call them. And it's usually, everybody has a different word for it, I find. And, we're talking about, I think most people have seen the lines above their head that are being sprayed on them on a continual basis. At least in my area, pretty much all summer, I can just sit out in my backyard and they're pretty much any sunny day, they're going back and forth in grid patterns. And a lot of people I've heard say that that's normal, that trains, oh my lord, that planes emit something like that, and that's just a normal contrail. But I remember contrails when I was little, and you were lucky to see one, and the jet would be so high up in the sky you could barely see it, and it would dissipate within seconds. It wasn't something that lingered and covered the whole sky for days. So there's definitely, if you start digging into this, something going on here. And I figured, why not bring somebody in who's an expert and who can kind of talk to us about what is going on above our heads. That's what I want to know this. So that's why I started looking into it, because I mean, we should know what they're doing to us, and they're being very secretive in a lot of aspects. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome my guest here. Just give me one sec here. Welcome, Russ Tanner, once again to my crypt, and I'm so happy to have you back here to talk about geoengineering. How are you doing today?
Hey, doing good, doing good. It's a pleasure to be back with you. I'm glad to get to speak with you again.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. And just let everyone know, I've already done one interview with Russ. We were speaking about certain topics. I'm not even going to mention anything that we talked about on here because they wouldn't even let me post it. So if you want to check out that interview, just go to Rumble. I just started a Rumble account. It's uploaded there. It's got a lot of great views, and it's just Crypt Ricks I've been thinking. It's all one word. Crypt Ricks I've been thinking. And you can check that interview out that I did with Russ, and it's an amazing interview. But we're going to stay away from those topics today, Russ, and talk about, like I was saying, geoengineering. And I've got a lot of people that I've talked to, and some agree that something weird is going on above our heads and they are spraying. And I do have people, even in my own family, that think that it's totally normal and there's nothing weird going on, that those are just contrails from a plane. So kind of let me where did your interest start to get into when you like with these like with the geoengineering and stuff like that? Where did you start to take interest in this, and why?
I was living in Jamestown, New York. The year was 2005. It was November, and what got me interested, I remember the day as I saw trails start being formed across the sky. There's more history than this to it, but this is the short version.
Okay.
And right within about 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes after a trail would appear in the sky after a jet, I would start to taste metal in the air really, really strongly, and I would have symptoms. I would have joint pain, muscle pain. My thoughts would start spinning. My ears would start ringing. Tinnitus was really bad, and it was always associated with that. And I'd get really fatigued. My heart would start thumping. My blood pressure would expand. My veins in my arms would start to poke out like I was kind of like in a workout or something. And it was always associated. Every time a jet went over, and about 20 to 40 minutes later, that taste would get really, really strong in the air. And I had other people. I had 3 employees at the time, and 2 employees could taste it. One of them couldn't at all. My business partner could taste it when it got strong enough. So she wasn't as sensitive as I was, but I was very sensitive to it. And right away, I knew something was going on because the taste was outrageous. So that was my introduction to it, and that's why I got interested, started looking on the internet, immediately found out that other people had been reporting this for years before, back even like the 1995, 10 years earlier, it had started in certain areas over certain cities out west, or I think Minneapolis was one of the cities that they started early. And so I got very interested in it. I was very frustrated with it because it actually really challenged my health and ruined my quality of life.
Right, and that's what I've been hearing from a lot of people too. That a lot of people are showing a lot of that like symptoms and that when they're spraying extremely heavy with asthma and stuff like that. I have a few friends that on days that they're spraying really heavy above our heads, they have a really hard time breathing. Like whatever they're spraying is really laboring their breathing. But what I want to ask you about, let's go back because I want to kind of go back in history because I don't think people, maybe a lot of people listening don't realize that the governments have been messing with spraying stuff in our skies for a long time. Like they first started manipulating the weather and stuff like that. Can you kind of explain to people where it started and what they were doing back then? Because I know that they were messing with weather, trying to create rain and stuff. So kind of bring us back to where it kind of started, like where they started messing with spraying stuff in the clouds and what they're doing.
Yeah, weather experiments go back to the early to mid 1900s. Um, the father of weaponized weather actually did an interview, good hour and a half long interview that I had posted on one of our websites. His name, I'm trying to recall his name. I can almost recall it. I'll pull it up. But he actually was in the Air Force. And he was in charge of the program, and this I believe was in the 50s. And they were actually steering hurricanes, and they were modulating rainfall, meaning they could induce rainfall, they could stop rainfall. But the real important thing is they could actually break hurricanes down. They actually took a hurricane that was very damaging, Category 4, I think it was, and brought it down to below Category 1. Winds less than 70 miles an hour, I believe it was. Just with a few, with less than maybe $10,000 worth of aircraft assets. Had a few jets up there releasing some stuff at the right place at the right time. They got good at it, and this was like in the 50s. In the 50s, they were doing this, and then what this Ben Livingston is his name. Then
Right,
what
right.
happened? Yeah, then what happened to him is he actually said, and this is what they do. I mean, I've been in this a long time. I know what they do. They moved the whole program into military secrecy, and the way they did that is the program was originally, this is the Air Force, the program was originally public. It was known in the Air Force back at this time. And what they did is they made it so bureaucratically laden that they made it so that they couldn't even function. So the bureaucrats, they laid all these requirements that you can't do a flight unless these requirements are met, unless this is met, unless we have this funding, unless we do. So they basically loaded the bureaucracy so heavily on the program that the program was disbanded. And that's the way they actually move it into military secrecy by making it look like it was just a bureaucratic mess. That was the intention all along, in my opinion, obviously. In fact, Ben Livingston actually says the same thing. This is the way that they just took it and took it into a subversive program by
Right,
making it look like bureaucrats messed up the program and then it doesn't exist anymore.
right.
But as we all know, there have been, Kennedy and Johnson and other presidents have said, you control the weather, you control the world. This has been one of the aspirations of military for decades and decades. They had talked about this. And so it's a very, very effective weapon that can be used by the military, even not just militarily, but economically.
Oh, for
And
sure, for
yeah,
sure.
so they're not going to want to get rid of that. It's not like they forgot. So every time I see a hurricane, I was raised in Florida. Every time I see a hurricane, the hurricanes that hit Louisiana or Mississippi or Florida, knowing that they have that technology available and they don't use it to protect the people, one day there's going to be accountability for that.
Yes, and I agree. There's got to be accountability for what they're doing, and because that's when I first started kind of hearing about like because I'm a World War II and like Vietnam and a buff like that. I like to watch documentaries on that, and then I remember watching a documentary on Vietnam how they were spraying. They were changing the weather. They were flooding out the trails in the jungle and making it rain nonstop. And so they definitely, since like you said in the 50s and even probably further back, they were learning how to steer weather, like you said, mess around with it. And that's a great point that you make. That is a really powerful weapon. I don't think people realize if you have the ability to change the weather of an area, that's worse than a bomb or anything like that. Because the worst part about it, the way I see it, Russ, is you don't even know you're being attacked. A lot of people wouldn't even know they're being attacked if they're changing the weather. They just blame it on whatever El Nino, whatever they blame. They always have an excuse for the weather the way it goes.
Yeah, they've got to have a cover story for
Right,
everything. And I see that with everything from, I don't know what we can talk about because I don't want you to get YouTube hits, but
right,
so many things going on. There's all these, they always have to have a cover story. So there's there's plausible deniability
Mm-hmm.
in the eye of the public, because if the public knew what has been done against them from scientific quote unquote experimentation, how can you say something's an experiment if it's a known toxin and you're exposing the public to it? Releases from the air and other things in more recent history.
Yep.
Um, how can you call that an experiment? It's just a cop out way of trying to make it more acceptable to the public. So
Right, and that's what they're kind of like, and that's what I'm finding with the research in the geoengineering is that there's a lot of not everybody's on the same page, is what I should say. Like some people are saying they're doing it to cool the planet. Some are saying that they're doing it to change the weather, and I think it's personally it's a little bit of all of it. I think that they're doing all of that with the spraying that they're doing. Now, can you explain to people, because I get this all the time when I talk geoengineering, especially to people around me, that this is normal. When planes fly overhead, they leave a contrail, and this is totally normal. I know it's not normal because I live by an airport and I've seen contrails. They dissipate within seconds. I've only seen a handful in my whole life, and now, like before this, and now I see them every day, and they're just lingering. So, can you explain to people how hard it is and how rare it is that you would get a contrail? Like it just doesn't happen like this.
yeah, it's almost impossible because the air is so dry at altitude where jets are flying, and that's part of the reason. And also because the ratio of fuel burn to the amount of air that is moving is huge. You have an enormous amount of air, and in fact, in modern aircraft engines, they use what are called high bypass turbofans. And about 15% of the air that comes out of the back of that turbofan engine is combusted, meaning it's actually the result of an explosion that took place inside the engine to provide combustion, or a continuous type of explosion. 85% of the air, which is around that center core where the combustion takes place, goes out and mixes with that and provides the vast majority of the thrust. So you immediately have a massive dilution of that air. It's diluted with other air
Mm-hmm.
that is moving very, very quickly in very, very dry air. And so in my personal experience, I started when I was a kid. I was in elementary school. I went to Maryland schools. I lived there at the time. And I started getting very, very interested in jets and rockets. And I actually was interested before that, but I started collecting pictures of them. And I actually accrued like a pile. I would skip lunch, take my lunch money, and go to the local library, and I would just copy pictures from books. I thought it was the coolest technology. I wanted to be involved in all my life.
For sure.
And in all the thousands of pictures that I accrued over the years that I was in elementary school, I'd never heard of a contrail. I never saw one come out. There was never a picture of one. I had never even heard of it. In all the books that I saw, read, checked out, looked at, glanced pictures, copied, whatever it was, never heard of it. There was no such thing in my experience. Never heard of such a thing. Then all of a sudden, in 2005, when I was in Jamestown, and got to remember, Jamestown doesn't have a large airport. People who do their research, you'll see Jamestown, New York, where I was living at the time that I first experienced this. They have a small airport, so you can't even land a 737 there. It's just for smaller prop jets. So you
Okay.
don't see jets in the sky. You don't see them. All of a sudden, one day, we had jets flying so low that if you had binoculars and they had visible numbers, which they didn't, you would be able to read the numbers. They were
Wow.
unbelievably low. They were releasing these massive plumes, and within the space of 1 to 2 hours, they would completely overcast the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So this was deliberate. I'm like, what is going on? And originally, I thought, wow, people are going to think, what is going on? And look up and just see this massive change and see how these plumes are spreading out and covering the sky every day. They were doing this.
Yep.
Not to mention tasting it and smelling it, because if I was tasting and smelling it, and a couple of my employees could, surely other people were as well. But much to my surprise, uh, an astounding small percentage of people even noticed that this was going on, much less talked about tasting and smelling it, maybe because they felt awkward. So yeah, the idea of a contrail is something I never even heard of, being as deep in aircraft. In fact, I've had an airborne ranger in my family. I had a military family. My stepfather was in the military. We lived on a military base for a couple of years down south. I've been exposed to this all my life, and I've never even heard the word contrail. in my life until this happened. And then you had all these disinformational saying, oh, that's all just normal. That's normal jet
Mm-hmm.
aircraft. And that's just the way it works. Well, incidentally, people need to do a little bit of critical thinking and realize that if you're looking in the skies in countries, in cities all across the world, really, I saw when this started in 2005 in Jamestown, where they covered the sky. And like I said, you wouldn't even see jets. You, occasionally, if one was in the right position at high altitude, you might see it ping off the sun for a few seconds.
Right.
But there's no large low altitude jets in Jamestown. All of a sudden, you have these jets appear that absolutely obliterate the sky. Looks like a war is taking place over you. I travel up and down because my family, I grew up in Florida, so I would travel from New York to Florida several times by air or by ground driving. And everywhere you go, the sky's obliterated. Then over time, now what's happened in the last, I don't know, 5 to 8 years in many cities, including the Bangor area in Maine where I live, is all of a sudden on all but maybe a handful of days out of the month, these trails are gone. They're they're gone. You can hardly see them here anymore, except for a few days out of the month. So you've got to ask what happened.
I was just going to
Did
ask you that.
Right? People have to, any citizen, any person. Maybe you shouldn't call yourself a citizen. That's a whole nother discussion. But I've been in this a long time. Let me tell you. But anybody who does any critical thing should say, well, gee, why did all these trails start? And then 10 years or 5 years or 8 years, depending on where you're living later, why did they all suddenly disappear? And now they're spraying at high altitudes, and they're mostly all short, very, very short, non-precision trails, so you can't see them. Of course, in my mind, I'm saying, well, they're out of sight, out of mind. They're trying to keep this out of the mind of the public.
Right.
So this is not something that historically took place. The textbooks that are saying that are lies. They're absolutely lying to people. And of course, anybody who does their research, textbooks lie all the time.
That's
Textbooks are
true.
absolutely saturated with lies. They've anything from, I don't know what I can mention or not, but historically, I personally have found and had other people, and there's even organizations that expose the lies that
Yep.
are put forth in textbooks. They're full of propaganda. So
$100%.
just because a textbook says it, just because the news says, "Oh yeah, back in the 70s the sky was covered with," no, it wasn't. I was there.
So
I'm
was I.
7 years old. I've never seen one. I've never seen anything like this, and I've lived in the busiest airspaces in the planet. When I lived in Maryland, we had Dulles, we had everything that goes on there. I lived in Tampa Bay area, where you can hardly look up without seeing a jet in the sky. I never saw a trail come in. If I ever saw a trail come out of a jet, I thought there would be a serious issue going on.
Right.
You know,
Yep. And I was true. I was in this I was born in the '70s too, so I know what you're saying. I was there, and I love the way you say that. Like they try to say that this is normal. I live by a medium sized airport, and as I was saying before, I remember like the odd time the jet would be so high in the sky, like you said, you'd see a little ping of sun off of it, and there would be like a little teeny contrail behind it, like I mean very small, and it would dissipate like as the plane was moving it would dissipate. Like it wasn't like it lingering. It was it was so rare that I would see one. I could probably count on one hand in my whole life that I would see these little teeny. And the plane was so high up there, the jet. And now, like you're saying, they're so low. And last summer was really bad here. Like I was really surprised that more people weren't noticing. I don't understand how people aren't noticing. It's amazing. I don't know if they're looking at their phones or probably that's what they're doing because they're not looking up. And I sit outside in my yard and I watch them do back and forth across where the sun is. It's in the morning the sun comes up. It's beautiful, clear skies, not a cloud in the sky. And then within a couple hours, they got this smog that all of a sudden is just it's like a milky, clear, white goo. I call it like a cotton almost that they spray. It looks like in the sky, and so it's there. I don't know how people rest aren't noticing it. I really don't. It's really alarming that more people are not. Are starting to say something about it. That's why I want to talk about it.
yeah, pilots. I mean, pilots have noticed it. I mean, veteran pilots.
Right.
I've had pilots call me personally because I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk about it. So I've talked to thousands of people over the years about this and mercury toxicity and other things too.
Yep.
Um, and I remember I've had a couple pilots call me within like a couple weeks of each other, And one guy was he was actually retired, and his wife was still flying for a major carrier. Didn't tell me who it was, but he flew as a hobby, and they love flying together. You know, they had their own access to a plane. I don't know if they owned it or not, but he says, "I just wanted to thank you for your work you're doing." He says, "I've been flying for 25 years or whatever it was. I think it was 25 years he was flying. His wife still flies." He said, "We'd never seen anything. We'd never seen anything come out of an engine before.
Wow.
We've never seen anything like this before. This is all brand new." And then another pilot called me a few weeks later, said basically the same thing. So you know, and also I know people who, when I do share this with people who haven't heard about this before, I shared it with somebody, a nurse actually, a few weeks ago, and she said, I started asking people about this, and you'd be surprised how many people know about this. And she goes,
Okay.
I never realized this because nobody talks about it. And I'm like, well, I talk about it. But you're right. I mean, I think what it is because media, and this is one thing, this is one of my favorite subjects also to talk about, is the psychology and the disinformation and the social pressure, the way that they actually use social pressure to keep people from talking about certain subjects,
Yep.
because they ostracize them or they isolate them, making them say, oh, you're paranoid. And so people don't want to be associated with paranoid people, so they're not going to say anything that makes them sound like they might believe or support the same belief system that
Mm-hmm.
they're associating with paranoid people. Unfortunately, the fact is, it is not people who look at hard truths that are paranoid. It is the people who avoid hard truths that are paranoid. Those are the most fearful people you'll ever run into. It is the truthers. It is the people who are willing to stand up and tell the truth, even if it's not popular. Those are brave and courageous people, and I appreciate what they do.
I totally agree, and that's what I've noticed too with, well, as you were saying with the media and stuff like that. I mean, I haven't watched media. I've never taken media serious for the last 30 years of my life, to be honest, and I just know that they were lying to us, and I have no problem saying that. I would say that to a reporter's face. I really would. I have no fear of that, and you're right. They want to put people in a state of fear, and that's all they pump on the news now. It's constant fear. If you go to their websites, it's constant fear. And if you start questioning anything, they label you a conspiracy theorist, which they've made that into a bad thing. Which it never should. It's not a bad thing to be a conspiracy theorist. I mean, to look into things, and I encourage people to do that. Do your own research. Like, don't just listen to the news, what they tell you, or some website. You have to dig into it and get information from multiple sources. So I totally understand, Russ, what you're saying, that they they don't want people talking about it. They just don't. They want people to be ashamed and scared to talk about it.
Exactly. And this is I did an interview. I did an interview for BBC.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, about a year ago. I did an interview with the Atlantic. I did an interview with CNN on this subject, and the CNN and the Atlantic, um, the interviews were so they did it over. They all these interviews were over the phone, and they recorded them, and then some were to be print. Other ones, I think they were going to take clips from it. I got the feeling from especially a couple of those interviews that I talked, science. I talked a lot of science. I talked about my experience. I talked about people I know, about history, about what I've seen, um, but especially about science, because we have lab tests. I
Right.
mean, this
Yeah.
is solid information. And I felt like the people giving the interviews were almost shaking at the end of the interviews.
Wow.
The two of them in particular, I could tell they were so nervous at the end of the interview. It was just they were so uncomfortable because I just gave them. I was very respectful and nice and just gave them the information, and it scared them. And I think when you sit people down, because I think a lot of these reporters don't really know. They're put on assignment, go gather information. We're
Right.
going to take it, turn it into an article. Now, I did an interview with BBC, and this guy is actually a writer who's in the public eye. He wrote an article. I have a copy of the article. I told him about the science. I told him about lab tests. I told him about USDA 35-year veteran scientist who's actually a genius, literally Mensa guy. I talked to you about USDA crop adjuster who worked and actually did test after test showing the correlation between groundwater metals and the visible spraying in the spray, the visible releases, because there was a correlation between groundwater. This was somebody who worked for the government for a long period of time. talked about military people, talked about water test, blood test correlation, talked about other scientists who've taken the fallout and measured it, talked about the history of this. I gave them a tremendous amount of information. This BBC article where I gave them all of this science, all of this information, all of these resources, where if they were really caring about the people, they would have looked in. If this was real journalism, they would have looked in and said, wow, okay, we need to look into this. This is a
Right.
lot. The article didn't touch on any of those things. All it did is said, the only mention of my interview was said Russ Tanner is typical of the paranoia that exists in these movements. That's it. I'm
Incredible.
not paranoid. I'm brave enough to speak out about these things when other people aren't.
Exactly.
And I don't care. I mean, it's a matter of life and death, and people need to understand this. So, but that's how media works. For those who don't get it and don't understand yet, it's all about defaming us. So guess what I did this week? 2 weeks ago, I got a letter from PBS. They wanted to talk to me about an interview.
Okay.
And just an hour, about 2 hours before you phoned me here, or before you Skyped me here, Vice, a few days ago, Vice, Vice News,
Yes.
actually contacted me, and they wanted to talk to me and get information about my experience with it and the health effects and da 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 da. I turned them both down. I'm,
Really?
yeah, I all they're going to do is do hit pieces.
True.
You research them. It's like, what I'd rather do is I'd rather give this information to people like you who are going to give it an honest chance to get out in the public, and those people who are interested in hearing science, hearing the truth, hearing the experiences are actually going to hear it without having someone like me being associated as paranoid or whatever. PBS, they can go find and make up whatever stories they want, because I've never seen an organization that produces more propaganda than PBS.
Right.
PBS is unbelievable. I'd say 9 out of 10 stories that come across my feed, and I don't know why they come across my feed on Facebook. Their titles are based on false information, propaganda. It is absolutely unbelievable. And of course, we all know the other mainstream news does
For
the same.
sure. Yeah, I mean that's what I was saying. I haven't believed the mainstream media for so long because with just a little bit of research and half the stuff that they talk about, you can find that they're not telling the truth. And I saw it firsthand, Russ, what was going on in Ottawa, because I live in Canada and I know people that were at the truck rally. And the news that the information that the media was putting out there about what was going on at this rally was not what was going on the ground. I know the people that were there, and it was not what they were reporting. It was a complete opposite, actually, if I'm being honest. And that's just the truth. I mean, the truth is what it is, and I'm not going to be scared to tell the truth because more people have to start standing up for truth because we're losing truth. And we're losing our freedoms like crazy. We're losing as you know, we're losing our freedom of speech. We're losing everything. They're censoring everything. So I'm going to fight for truth and make sure it gets out there the best I know how to do it. And so that's why I love having you on here. And I thank you for that because it does take courage. It takes courage to stand up. A lot of people, I think, like you said, Russ, they know what's going on. They see above their head what's going on, but they're scared because they don't want to be made fun of. They don't want to be labeled. I get what you're saying when you say that. I totally understand because I've felt that way at times.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that if you don't have courage in a country, you're not going to have freedom very long.
Exactly.
That courage does not exist. Freedom does not exist without courage. So people need to wake up and get actively involved because we are on the cutting edge of losing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And for the people who don't know that, if anybody's listening, I'm sure you have a pretty sophisticated audience. But if you've got some visitors on here and they don't know that, please get involved and educate yourself first of all, so you know what's going on. And you know how to present yourself and this information once you realize this is really happening. But the other thing about media you were talking about, back in the early 90s, I worked with a small political party in Florida. I wanted to give something back to my country. I wanted to help people. I had a little bit of free time on my hands. Not a lot. I was still working. I worked in the theater, but sometimes I'd have a few days off in a row, and then sometimes I'd work, 40 hours in a 3 or 4 day stretch. That's how it was. But with those days off, I wanted to do something. So I got involved with a small political party that was all about freedom. It was really cool party, very, very educated, smart people. And what blew my mind is we would have rallies and we would get together with other people and have get-togethers, public events. And these events, were reported by media as having usually about 10% of the attendance that they actually had. So we had an event in a big hall. It was actually an arena that had about 5,000 people there, if I remember the numbers right. And if I remember right, they reported 500. This
Incredible.
was right. And this is before I fully knew the depth of what was going on. I had been studying government for about 5 years. I mean, I had been actively involved in actually learning because I really wanted to know what was going on. Because I started here, I had a little bit of contact with people who were telling me things that didn't fit into my worldview. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to dismiss what you're saying. I'm going to go find out. And I actually would go to law libraries and do research. I was passionate about knowing truth. Truth is important. And every time we had a rally or did something, they would like cut the attendance down, that they would report 90% so that they only said 10% of the attendance was there that was actually there. Contrary, when other groups in Florida were doing rallies of things that the government liked. Okay, the
Right.
stuff, freedom, our government doesn't like freedom for the people. So they always cut our attendance numbers down when they reported it. But when there was something that they liked, any one of the subjects that they like, they would do the opposite. You would go and you'd see maybe 100 people there, and they say, "Oh, there was 1,000, 1,500 people there, lots of attendance. It was great, very positive reporting." And that was where I even got my eyes open more. I'm like, they're lying. Their
Yep.
numbers don't even match because at that time the police estimates, because there would be police whenever you had a big rally, you'd have police there, a few, just as goodwill. You'd have them come in, and they would give an estimate of attendance. The official police estimates didn't even match media. You know, we
Incredible.
they would be at that time. I know a lot. Sometimes the police departments these days don't give accurate numbers. That's
For sure.
the way it's gone. But even back then, when the police were being upright and honest about the numbers of the attendance, the media was still just completely crushing it.
Wow. So basically, whatever the media says on a lot of topics, just think the opposite, and you probably got the truth because that seems to be what they're doing. They're so blatant about it now too. That's the incredible thing. They're very bold, and I mean, they just lie. I just tell people that. I'm like, and I still know people that watch mainstream media news, and they believe it, and I'm like, they're lying to you. I don't understand how to get it through their head. I mean, I guess everybody's got to wake up at their own speed, maybe, or whatever, and keep hitting them with the information, and they might sink in, I think.
Yeah, I think that is the problem, because people have the power, and you see what's happening in the UK,
Yep.
right? They've lifted all these mandates. They've completely went back. They're now putting the local officials on notice. There looks like there's court cases forming because there have been crimes against humanity committed, and look at what they've done. And the reason I say that is because the people ultimately have the power. There's
Hmm.
an old saying that says government serves those whom they fear. If the government fears globalists, they will serve the globalists. If the government fear the people, they will serve the people. And the problem right now is that there's too many people not actively involved. You need to be active in numbers and be coordinated so that these officials do fear the people in a healthy way,
Hmm.
fear the people, and say, I'm going to do what the people want, and I'm going to properly represent them. Of course, better yet, get the bad ones out of office. I would much rather have my neighbor with common sense in office than
Me
than
too.
2/3 of the people that are in office right now, who are bought, paid for, and corrupt. People have no idea how far gone Congress and the legislatures of the states are gone, and the governors and the prosecutors are bought and paid for.
Hmm.
The whole system, uh, I mean, we're talking 80, 90% bought and paid for and gone.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
I totally agree. I've been saying that for years, and I always tell people too that you don't even get into high government and stuff like that unless they have something on you that, and they know that you're corruptible. You just, like, I think people think, "Oh, I'll just run for president or I'll run for prime minister." And it doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, it doesn't. You have they have I always believe this, Russ, they have to have something on you or know that they can manipulate you to even make it high in the government. And that's the problem. Is that you're dealing with people that are corrupt and they're just not good people, to be honest. I'm just putting it blunt. They're not good people and they don't care about us.
Not at all. They don't care at all about the
Exactly.
people. They have disdain and they have no respect for the people. They're there for themselves. They get their job and they know that they're going to make a tremendous amount of money, because how many stories have we seen now about these representatives, so-called, that go into office, 10 years later they come out and they're worth $500 million.
Yep.
It's like, where did all this money come from? How did you become a millionaire during your employ as a public servant?
Yep.
How did this happen?
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree, and I've just I and of course, before we try to get good people in there, I mean, like my neighbor with common sense would be 100 times better than the
I
corrupt
agree.
the people that they're in there. But you've got to get the voting system fixed first. I've been talking about the voting system for 10 years now. There's fundamental issues,
Right.
going
Yeah.
on with that.
Oh no, I agree. So, but we should try. I should try. I could talk to you about so many things. So, let's get back to the chemtrails, because there is something I want to ask. Now I know that you do a lot of research on it, and people have been testing what's coming out of these engines and what they're spraying on us. What from the research you've done, what are they finding in these chemtrails? Like, what are these geoengineering, whatever they're spraying? What are the lab's results showing?
Well, Dr. Marvin Herndon is one of the best examples of this. He actually took fallout after, he did several examples where he took fallout after spray events. And he would find mercury, and excuse me
You're
just a
busy.
sec. I have it on Do Not Disturb, and of course, somebody's just gonna decide to call me right during this time. Um, Technology. But anyway, so he found mercury, lead, cadmium, arsenic, and in fact, one of the studies he did, uh, he actually published it, and then redacted. In what he did, forgive me.
I don't
Just,
mind at all. Just
yeah,
you're a busy person, I know.
yeah, just I have it on Do Not Disturb, and of course, it's not going to work. So,
Well, no, they'll just keep going. They'll keep calling.
oh, okay, yeah, all right. So anyway, so he found lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury in the tests that he's done, and he actually published it. The study was redacted eventually, and of course, as good studies like Dr. Oh my gosh, several of them, several good ones. But let me read a little bit from what he actually said. He
Okay.
has a study called Contamination of the Biosphere with Mercury, Another Potential Consequence of Ongoing Climate Manipulation Using Aerosolized Coal Fly Ash. Now, the reason he came up with this, for those, like you said, you had some friends who don't believe this or they want to hear the science behind it.
Right.
He actually found out that the chemical signature of what was in the fallout that he captured and had lab tested was in direct proportion to what you find in coal fly ash. And what you find in coal fly ash is very interesting, because you find lead, arsenic, cadmium, mercury, and these toxic metals.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is that the ratios between the metals were identical to what is found in coal fly ash. So for a while, people were talking in our movement, we're talking about that we believe that one of the primary things that they are releasing is coal fly ash, probably because it's a waste product that's cheap and easy to come by. It doesn't cost them a whole lot. Now, I don't think this is the only thing, because as somebody who can smell and taste it, as somebody who feels symptoms from it, I actually believe that there are several different types they're spraying, and they've been introduced over time. And I've given names to them, and I've written articles on every type I've encountered. Some of these types actually are related to precipitation. The barium type, and that's my name. I'm not saying it has barium, but I named it barium because barium is used in barium salts are used in weather manipulation to actually
Right.
stop rainfall. So I said, well, I don't know what barium tastes like, but I'm going to name this the barium type, because this particular type is always sprayed 12 to 24 hours before a front moves in over us. And in fact, it's so predictable, and I'm not making this up. I work at my computer most of the day. I do computer programming is mostly what I do. Is I will be sitting here and then we'll get hit with a plume. It'll come on me and I'll start tasting, wow, that's the barium type. This will happen once a week, twice a week, something like this. And I'll go look at radar. I never bother looking at radar. I don't go out much. I live in Maine. The weather's horrible during the winter. So here I am at my desk. Sure enough, every single time I taste the barium stuff in the air, we've got a front moving in. And they don't just spray it once, they spray plume after plume after plume for 12 hours, 24 hours, a couple days, or whatever. And you can look on radar and you can actually see huge areas, and oftentimes they're rectangular,
Yeah,
that
I've
will
seen them.
just, yeah, within a couple hours, they will be completely dense precipitation, and it will just completely go away. Like within a space, often within a space of 1 hour, like a
Mm,
big chunk of the entire system is just gone. It just vaporizes. And so, you know, I believe that I've done my own rainwater tests, and I found the same things. We found arsenic, cadmium, lead, mercury. Did a dust test where you can take dust out of your air purifiers. I've got some air purifiers which actually don't work very well against the chemtrail fallout at all,
right.
which led me to conclude that the particulates are too small to be captured by HEPA filters. So,
Wow, that's small then, to be
yeah,
honest.
that's less than zero point 0.3 microns. So we're talking about really small particulates. But if you think about it, that's what they had to do. Because if people discovered that they were sick, people who couldn't smell and taste it, they got an air purifier in their house and they're like, wow, I feel 100 times better. It's changed my life. It makes all the difference in the world. Then people would say, well, there's something in the air. And once they concluded there's something in the air, then the question is where it's coming from. It's
Right.
got to be coming from the jets because nothing else has changed. So the people who designed this program had to make it in such a way that it would not be removed by typical household air filtration equipment. So they had to make the particulates small enough. And that also works in their favor as well, because I believe part of their agenda, besides weather manipulation, is population reduction.
Hmm.
And this sounds crazy to some people, but it's not my idea. It's right in their own literature. You can read
Exactly.
the Kissinger report. You can read, was it MSM 200, I think it is, the National Security Memo 200, which is the Kissinger report, which talks about the plan for depopulation. You can look at the United Nations, which not only has a population department, but the head of it has written books who talk about having wanting depopulation. So that's why you said earlier, a little bit of research and you start uncovering that the people who are put in very high positions are not they don't have ethics that are in the best interest of the people. Do you
Right.
want somebody high up in the UN that believes in depopulation or in
Exactly. They
so
don't. Yeah, they don't want us here. They want to reduce the population, and they're very clear. That's what I like what you said. They're very open about it. If you start doing a little research, they're not hiding how they feel about us. They it's there. You just got to do a little research, and I don't think people want to believe. Like I even have people that say the government is here to help us. They don't, and I've had people tell me this. I don't even know what to say to them anymore. But they're like the government would never do this. They're here to help us, and I'm like, you really don't know the evil that you're up against if you believe that, because they're not here to help you, and they're very open about what they think of us and what they want. They want to reduce the population. We're not. That's not conspiracy theory. That's just what they're from their own mouth.
yeah,
Incredible.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that once you start really understanding the way that the politicians, the ones who are bought and paid for, look at the public,
Mm-hmm.
and this gets into, I mean, when you start, and this is where I went, because I got into this in the mid 80s. That's when I started learning about this stuff. And as I kept learning, eventually I wanted to learn about why would these people have this kind of attitude towards the public? Because I don't. I want to see people happy. I want to see
Me
people
too.
prosper. I feel like I have a pretty healthy view of what I want for people. But why do these people do things that are always against? Well, you start learning about what their belief system is. You start learning about what Bill Cooper talked about, if you're familiar with him.
Yes.
William Cooper talking about the mystery schools and what they believe, the religion, so to speak,
Yep.
of the globalists. And when you start understanding what their actual belief system is, it all makes sense.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's good. It's really, really bad. but it makes sense, and you can see that these people who actually believe this would actually not only have disdain for the public, but want to see the public depopulated.
Yes, and I talk about it a lot in my shows, and I call it the dark occultist. And I try to tell people that government is a cult, the police force is a cult, the military is a cult, and I know that, and that upsets a lot of people. But it's like I said, I say the truth, and the truth is the truth. And it is you're dealing. The people don't realize the evil cult that we're against, and it is. It's an evil cult running this world, and what they're doing, and they're very open about it when you start digging into it. And I know a lot of people I talk to, they'll say, well, I don't believe in evil like that, I don't believe in Satanism, I don't. And I said, that's fine, you may not believe in it, but these people do believe in it. They are very skilled at what they do. They're all on the same page. They're all working together to get this done. This is a global thing that's happening, and I just don't think people realize that this is evil cult that's running this world, and they're dark occultists, they're master psychologists. They've got humanity pegged. They know exactly what we're going to do, how we're going to react. And I don't think people want to they don't believe that something this evil could be going on, and it is. It just is. I mean, I don't know what more to say.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't people don't want to face it because it's
Right.
too scary. And this is why you have to be brave to actually face these hard truths. And what you said, I think, is so true. They are master psychologists. These people, if you know neurolinguistics, now I haven't studied it formally, but I've studied it informally on my own. If you know basic psychology and coercion and these subjects, which I have no personal interest in until I started seeing it being used on the news,
Right.
they will use certain words when they're telling stories. Like, for instance, if they want to defame you, if they want to weaken your argument, they say, Russ Tanner claims that he can smell chemtrail. The word claims is a weak word. It's a
Yep.
controversial word. So you'll always see the word claims used for an adversary that they want to defame. If they want to make you look like you have credibility, they'll say you made a statement.
Hmm.
You have a statement. You have made a statement, or you've been a witness to this. Those are very strong and positive words. Claims is a very weak word. And as you get into it, you start realizing that the news articles, movies, and television today, you cannot. Now, I don't watch much television,
Yeah,
but
me neither.
yeah,
I
but
stay
for
away
you,
from it.
yeah, exactly. But I became interested, and so for several years, I would watch one or two shows at night before I'd go to bed. And what I would do is I would actually write down all of the propaganda I would see in those shows. And the thing is that people who don't know what the globalists are doing would never recognize the propaganda. But when you know what they have planned for you, when they know they want depopulation, when you know that they are planning on an asteroid catastrophe, this is
Hmm.
something that they have talked about in their own. This is not me saying this. This is something I heard about from inside whistleblowers 10, 15 years ago. They talked about this. So what do you start seeing in Saturday morning cartoons that the kids are watching? You start seeing asteroids. You start seeing movies made about asteroids. You start saying this is only one slice of the pie.
Hmm.
But when you know the future, you know what their plans are, you actually see this stuff playing out in media, and you see them using little words and phrases that also promote and give credibility to the things they want to promote, the things that are destructive or globalism or central. They always want to promote the idea that you can't solve the world's problems unless the nations come together. And it's a real nice sounding idea on the surface. But the problem is the entity that's going to be formed, that is going to have regulatory power over all the nations, is going to be run by the same people who are causing all the problems right now.
Exactly.
They are the ones who are pushing for globalism. This is why centralization of power is dangerous. The power should be in the hands of the people. It should be divided among the people, not conjugated into the hands of a small group of people, because you will always find the globalists there pushing for that centralization of power.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I couldn't say it. I couldn't say it better, Russ. I mean, it's amazing what you're saying, and I totally agree. And another thing I noticed too, that I always tell people, once you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, it's very obvious. Like I said, they're flaunting it in our face because they know most people aren't going to look into this. Most people don't believe that it's happening. And I see symbology everywhere. When you start noticing the symbology of what they're in their logos and everything, it's everywhere when you start looking. I see it everywhere now, like and especially in logos and commercials and stuff like that. It's really amazing how all of their symbology that they're inserting in places. And on a subconscious level, we're being attacked really hard. And I don't think people realize like what we're up against. I keep saying that, like we're really up against some evil here and people have to start doing some work and to get positive information out there, because if you think about the amount of lies that we're being told every day from all different sources and how much truth is getting out there, we're losing on that front. We have to get more people like me and you and other people speaking out and getting the truth out.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I appreciate shows like yours. What you're doing is critical in times like this. Absolutely critical, because if it wasn't for you and in people who are doing what you were doing, this would not get out at all. So
Right.
people, and this is the thing that's such a shame about this whole thing, is the power is in the hands of the people. They
Exactly.
actually fear you. I want people to think about this. Why do they do wicked, harmful, destructive things in secret? Why don't they just do them wide out? Why do they have cover stories? Because they're afraid you will find out. Because if you want the wrath of a mother or the wrath of a father because their son or daughter has either passed away or is suffering from chronic asthma that has changed or destroyed their life, and you begin to realize one day that chemtrails contain mercury, and mercury induces asthma, and asthma has become the number 1 to 3 new disease among non-smoking young people in the world, or in the United States at least, between
Wow.
1 and 3. Non-smoking, why do these kids have asthma? Well, guess what? Look in the literature. Mercury, when your lungs are exposed, cause massive inflammation and cause asthma symptoms. And so these kids are diagnosed with asthma or asthmatic bronchitis or something similar like that. So they do not want the parents to find out. However, now with these latest events that have been happening, people are waking up very quickly.
For sure.
I think people are waking up very quickly, and again, thanks to things to what you're doing. And here's the thing, because I've been in this a long time, and I know I know what their religion is. I know what their belief system is, and unfortunately, because I believe they're starting to lose control. There are whistleblowers that are starting to come out. Um, there's truth starting to get out. There are people quitting. You saw, well, certain things I can't talk about, I guess, but there are
Right.
things,
I know
there
what
are
you're
things,
saying.
yeah, there are things going on right now, and people are angry because they are realizing that they have been harmed due to massive intentional fraud. It's not an accident. It's not a bureaucratic uh, mistake. This is absolutely intentional. It's unmistakable. And they're learning now that their eyes are being opened. They're realizing that stuff like this, like about amalgam fillings and other issues that have been doing the same kind of things to people, have been going on for decades and decades. Now that you've got people who are really getting angry about this, the unfortunate thing we face now is the war card. Um,
Very true.
Globalists, they always had this as plan B. And this is what I've been listening to whistleblowers since the 80s. That's when I started listening to every whistleblower I could. When I worked for the political party, we had um, um, military, um, what are they called? Newsletters. They had these analysts, these high-level analysts who had come out of high places, who had contacts, and they would write newsletters. Or like I think it was the McIlvaney Intelligence Advisor was a big one, and of course it cost it was very expensive. I couldn't afford it at the time, but they would be laying around, where I would volunteer, and I'm like,
Wow.
oh, this is awesome. And so I started learning this stuff, and so the problem that we face right now, because people have let this go so far and try to pretend everything is okay and not get involved, is that I believe that globalists are now, and I've been saying this for 10 years, I said they're going to play the war card eventually, because when people wake up, that's when it's going to get very dangerous. And so
Exactly.
it's no mistake right now, folks. This is no surprise to me. This is what my business partner and I talk about this. We know this was coming, because what they're going to do is they're going to try to disarm the public. At the same time, they're going to make war with Russia. And of course, Russia's coordinated. Now, not a lot of people don't believe how deep this goes, but I look at it in the intelligence that I have, in the whistleblowers I've listened to for the years. Over the years, will tell you that Russia, China, the United States are all controlled by the same globalists.
Hmm.
And when you realize this, I mean, and this goes deep. I mean, I'm not saying this lightheartedly. If you look at the UCC law system, if you look at the golden fringe flag, if you look at the way that they implement laws, if you the yellow fringe flag venue has been implemented in every country of the world, virtually, except for a small handful of nations have not done this. That when that flag is flying in the presence of the execution of a contract, that flag, the law system represented by that flag, takes precedence. So just like you look up in the sky and you see trails and you want people to question and say, "What is that?" What I've been trying to get people to question since the 90s is say, when you go into your local county building, out front you will have your state and your country's flag
Mm-hmm.
flying.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you go inside, there's a different flag flying. It looks a lot like your national flag and your state flag, except it has a golden fringe and tassels hanging from it. It is not the same law system. It's a different entity. And then when you look around the world at the courtrooms around the world, you have exactly the same things in China, in Russia. I don't care if you go to Turkey. I don't care if you go to Dubai. I don't care if you go to the UK. You can go to England. You can go to Scotland. You can go to Ireland. It's exactly the same system. You have a non-yellow fringe flag outside, and you have the yellow fringe flag inside. You have two different entities, and this scheme was set up to fool the people with two different flags that look almost identical with subtle differences in every country of the world except for just a couple outliers. And once
Wow.
people see that, yeah, once people understand that, then you'll understand that the upcoming war with Russia, and this is something Rockefeller said in his book Memoirs. He said
That
one
was
of
a good
the
book. Very interesting.
well, one of the most important things he said in that book, in my opinion, is he said the way that you win any contest is to control both sides.
Right. I remember that.
And once you understand how the law system works and how the scheme, how the central banking system works in all the major countries of the world, you begin to see the artifacts and you begin to understand that every country in the world is controlled by the same globalists. So the timing of this war that we're about to get into is not a coincidence. That's just really luckily happening for globalists at a time when the public is waking up. This is not a coincidence. The public is
Exactly.
waking up. The public is getting angry. You've got convoys all over all over the world in countries starting because people are getting furious because they know what's happened to them. They know what's been done to them. And they're beginning to learn about past because anger can make people brave.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happening. And so now, just here we come. Here comes the war card being played. Now we're starting to have problems with Russia. You can see the I have two recordings of Biden on one of my websites that show Biden saying the highest priority we have in the world right now is to establish a new world order.
Right.
And how many presidents have said the same thing? And there's some people who are saying, "Oh, Putin's going to save us. Putin is a globalist." In fact,
I've heard
they've
that.
been they've been bought and sold a lot longer than the United States has. China was bought and sold. They have the same law system, the same duality of flag system that was implemented to fool the public in all of those countries. And so when you understand that these countries are all controlled by the same globalists, literally this is all orchestrated. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to disarm the public at the same time we're about to go to war. At the same time, people are waking up. Is this just a giant coincidence that these things are happening at the same time that works in the favor of globalists because globalists are just really lucky? No, it's not. It is
Exactly.
them orchestrating all of these events to make sure that they win this contest.
Right, and I agree. I agree with that 100%. I saw it when I started hearing the war talk. I was like, it didn't shock me at all. I was like, of course they're and it's once again everything that you just said, and once again they want to put fear. It's always fear that, and I think people have to realize that they always want you in a state of fear because when you're in a state of fear, you don't think clearly. You start reacting like you normally wouldn't react. And I try to tell people all the time, don't be scared to look into this stuff. Don't be scared to go and research this stuff. That's what they want. They want you scared and not looking at it and thinking everybody that does is crazy. Start looking in the dark corners. Start looking at this stuff because that is the last thing they want, and they don't want people waking up like you just said. That's for sure, and people are. So it doesn't surprise me. What did shock me when when you were talking about the flags with the gold fringe, I've seen that, and I've for some reason never thought about it. I don't know why. It's really weird,
Yeah.
and I never thought about it. That's so interesting, Russ. Wow,
Yeah. Yeah. In the last 5 to 7 years, it's been scrubbed from the internet. Um,
makes
you can.
sense.
It's really hard to find the yellow fringe flags in the courtrooms and pictures of other countries, whereas maybe 10 to 15 to 20 or years ago or
Mm-hmm.
earlier on in the internet, it was easy. You could find them everywhere. You could find these pictures. Now, in fact, I went looking a couple months ago because I was going to collect some of these pictures and show them to people. And I had a hard time finding them. And I'm like, wow, just, 5, 7 years ago, I could find these all over because people are realizing that this scheme is so much deeper than they realize, and it's international. This is
Wow.
not just the United States or a couple handful of countries. This is something that is international. When you listen to the whistleblowers, they will tell you. When you go into the courtroom, my business partner got a traffic ticket when we were in Florida. We were actually working with this political party because she and I worked together with the party. We both did volunteer work, and then she actually got a paid job, and I still volunteered. And she got a traffic ticket, and she was rather upset. She goes, "I'm going to go to court." Goes in front of the judge in the court, and she, to make a long story short, basically said, "I am declaring my right to travel according to the constitutional law. Da 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 da. So this, because of blah 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 blah, this is uncut." The judge says, "Overruled. Next." It's literally what it did. Overruled. Next. Now, how could he say that? Now, what we did is we did this as a test. And what's very interesting is that the judge is absolutely right in saying overruled because the flag flying in that room was not the American flag, and so it wasn't protected by the Constitution. The law system in force in that flag was the Uniform Commercial Code. And when people understand that you don't have rights under the Uniform Commercial Code, you have privileges. And that's why if you listen to the O.J. Simpson trials from years ago,
Mm-hmm.
when the state attorney was being questioned on when he was actually on the witness stand being questioned, he didn't say, "I'm asserting my Fifth Amendment rights." The words are very important. He says,
Words
"My
matter.
Fifth Amendment privilege." And you look at like, well, why did he say privilege? Because he doesn't have a right sitting in that courtroom. You don't have rights. You have privileges granted by the exercise of a contract when you exercise a contract. And that's a whole nother discussion.
Oh, I was just thinking that. I got to get you on to talk about that too. I mean, you're just a wealth of knowledge, Russ, and it's true too. And I think that's another problem too, which I even saw in Ottawa with the convoys. A lot of people, they don't even know their rights. Like I've been digging deep, especially for the last couple of years into like where I live in Canada, like what my rights are and all what the laws are. And I think that's another problem I see a lot. People don't even know what their rights are. They don't know the law at all. So I mean, no wonder that these people in the military especially the police and in the courtrooms, they can have their way with us, right? Because we don't even know the law. Like we don't know. Like people, cop pulls you over, wants to search your car. A lot of people say go ahead. They don't realize that they have rights and they're not. You have to look into them. You have to start learning this stuff to
Yeah.
fight against them.
Yeah, knowing your rights is power, and
Right.
we actually tested it. Laura actually with her Laura, they're in the Uniform Commercial Code. This is interesting to help people who might not understand how that fact that this is in all the countries of the world except for a couple small countries. It's the same law system. What we did is she went to get her driver's license renewed in Florida. And they take your picture, they give you a new little glossy laminated license, right? Well, when she signed for her license, she wrote the words "without prejudice" above her signature. Why did she do that? Because in the Uniform Commercial Code in section 1-207, it actually says if you want to retain your English common law and constitutional rights in the exercise of a contract, you can write the words "without prejudice" above your signature, or you can write 1-207 above your signature. So she tested it. So she went there and she signed that above her name, and the person who was handling her license didn't notice. Just didn't look twice, didn't notice. Months later, I think it was 6 months to a year later, it was some long period of time later, she got a letter, and I was there. I still have a copy of the letter. In fact, I have it posted on Orbis Vitae. The letter was from Harry Scott, Chief of Records in Tallahassee, the capital of Florida. And it said, there has been an error in the issuance of your driver's license. And here's the issue. Then it said, improper signature. If you, we would like you to go to the nearest DMV, the driver's DMV local office, and have a reissued driver's license. If you do not do this within 30 days, your driver's license will be revoked. So they were saying it was an improper signature. Well, it's interesting they're making a big deal about these two words above her signature, right? What is this all about? What is the big deal? So we went to the party we were working with. One of the guys was absolutely brilliant. The guy who was actually head of the party was like more knowledgeable than most any lawyer I've ever known. He was absolutely brilliant. So he helped fabricate a letter, and we responded and said, we have the right, according to the UCC, to do this under law. You are responsible to know the law, and by you sending us this, threatening to take away the contract which we are lawfully executing, you are committing mail fraud, malfeasance under the color of law, and we named several other laws that he was breaking, because it's what he did was illegal. If you know the law, the way laws really weren't written under the Uniform Commercial Code, then he was breaking the law. So we responded with that letter to Harry Scott, Chief of Records in Tallahassee, sent it back, certified to him, with saying, look, we're not going to do this. This is my proper signature. I'm executing it according to my rights under the UCC. So too bad. We're not going to do this. You know, it was a respectful letter. It was an official letter, sent it certified. Never heard back from them again. Never had her license revoked. Now, if that wasn't enough, my brother came down to stay with me one summer in Florida, or that following summer, and he said, I want to try this. I said, all right. So he goes to the same DMV office, right? And he gets a license because he was from New York. So he went to get his license. He goes to that DMV office, and he puts without prejudice above his name. You know, so nobody would really notice. You think the inspector looked at it and said, you can't do that. And he said, what do you mean I can't do that? I can do that. And she goes, no, you can't do that. And he's like, that's my signature under UCC. I have the right to do that. You can't stop me from doing that. You're breaking the law. Right. You know? And she's like, and she started getting a little nervous and saying, come back here, come to my office. So he went back to the office with her, and she's like, you can't do that. We can't have people do that. You're not allowed to do that. And he's like, why? Show me the law that tells me I can't do that. So she went to her filing cabinet, drew a letter from Tallahassee that said the DMVs of Florida now have a new policy that the attendants have to look for people who are signing without prejudice or UCC 1-207 above their name and reject their signature.
Incredible.
Yes. So why all of the hubbub about somebody writing? Because people who are doing that are exerting their rights to maintain their constitutional and English common law rights under the UCC, so that they're not giving up their rights. That's how you do it. So because they know they would never win a case in court, because what they're doing is illegal. In fact, it's fraud, malfeasance under the color of law. They would never win in court, so then they have to turn to policy. And they can't win it legally, they turn to policy, and they put up a barrier at the DMV to try to let those people working at the DMVs to become the regulators, to tell people you can't do this, even though it's completely untrue.
Incredible. And just thinking that if they're doing that for something like a driver's license, imagine all the policies they're writing to get around all these other laws that they don't want people. They don't even want you knowing these laws. For one thing, they don't like it. And I've seen a lot of videos and people have filmed with the police that once you start spitting the law at them, they take a whole different stance with you. When they know that you know your rights and they know that you know the law. But what's scary to me, Russ, is that the police officers that are supposedly helping and enforcing stuff, they don't even know the laws. That's the scary part. Half of them don't even know the laws. They don't even know. It's incredible when you start looking and digging into it. They don't even know the laws that they're sworn to uphold. It's very, very weird when you start digging into it.
Yeah, it really is. And it's funny because we learned We had another incident we happened. We were driving home from one of these meetings where we were educating the public about their rights in this
Right.
political party in Florida. And we were actually on our way home, and I was following Laura in my car. She was in her car. We met up in Tampa. And on the way home, she's a little bit of a lead foot. So uh, I always got on her. I'd like, take it easy there, be safe. But anyway, so I think she was speeding about 5 miles over the speed limit. So she got pulled over. So she, of course, the police officer walks up to her car, and I'm parked behind her a little ways. I pulled over, and I was just waiting for her, to get her stuff taken, get this to go over with, so we could finish our way home. So she told the police officer, he asked for license and registration. She goes, well, I don't really have to show you identification unless I'm being accused of a crime. So what's my
Exactly.
crime? And the officer goes, are you going to give me? So he starts howling at her. He starts, pointing his finger and howling. So you have to do this. This is the law. And she goes, according to my information, it's not the law. And all he did is he just got angry, and he went back to his car. And before we knew it, I'm just sitting back there. I don't know what's going on. Before I know it, there's about like 5 or 6 cop cars that come racing up with their sirens on. They pull
Oh
over on
my
the side of the
God.
road. I'm like, uh-oh, looks like she's doing it.
Yep.
Here
She's
we go.
exercising those rights. Oh.
She's exercising her rights. So, and it's intimidation. They want to make a big scene. They want to intimidate her into compliance because the law is not on their side. And some cops, in my experience, know that. In fact, I have family members who have retired from the police department, on both sides of my family, actually. So I've had a lot of interesting conversations
Oh,
with
for
them.
sure. I can imagine.
Yeah, but all these cops are showing up. The lights are going. It just looks like a crime scene. I'm like, oh my gosh. So finally, I kind of stopped my car. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? Well, so I'm not going to show my ID and did it. So anyway, we got settled. I said, look, we talked the police down and said, look, we'll voluntarily show you the ID if you let us go. We're doing this under duress.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to go home. We're not committing a crime. Let us go. So they looked at it, and then the guy said, well, don't do that again, because you can't do that. You just, but there's no ticket. There's no site, so we just went on our way. So
Yep.
it is amazing what you said. I mean, when you know the law, and especially when they don't, but if you know the law and you start citing it back, you have power, and people
You
need
do.
to know their power.
Exactly. I totally agree. And that's what I try to tell people that too. You got to start learning your rights for where you live. Because then you're armed then to a certain degree once you start knowing what your rights are and what they can and cannot do. And then when you start seeing the stuff that they're pulling on citizens and that and people that I saw at the protests and that, it's incredible, Russ, what they were getting away with. Like, I was just like, wow, like,
Oh yeah,
incredible.
yeah. You mean the what the police were getting away with, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, with
Yeah.
the police. Sorry, I had a frog in my throat. I was like trying to get that out. Yeah, what the police were getting away with at the protest was just, I mean, incredible. And it just showed me that we have a lot of work to do waking people up. I know a lot of people are waking up, but I keep saying too that after these convoy ends, we can't let off the gas on going after these people. We have to stay on it. Like it has to. We have to keep the momentum going. Like the convoys are a great way to start. It's uniting people. People are starting to wake up, but I just fear that they're going to pass lower these mandates, and then everybody's just going to go back to home and think that it's a job well done and they won, and then they're just going to put the boot back on the neck within a couple months. So we have to keep the forward momentum going. If I just wonder if you agree with that.
I totally and absolutely agree. In fact, if we don't, it's going to just get worse,
That's
and
what I say.
it's going to get worse very quickly. And what I would like to see people do is people who are grossly violating morality and law in these situations, the public needs to focus on them and bring them to court and make sure that there's justice. And what the public really, I believe, I mean, there's a lot of things we need to do, but this is just one example. What happens is people tend organizations tend to spread themselves very thinly.
Mm-hmm.
But what's going to happen potentially is that if you start focusing on these people who are doing wrong, and even it's not just a matter of going to court, it's about publicly making known what they're doing that's not only illegal, but it's immoral, it's harmful to the public, what they're doing, what their history is. You need to make this known, and you need to be absolutely incessant in doing this until there's lawful justice. You have to do this because once the system is forced into turning against one of their own, then everybody who is on that side, everyone who's thinking, oh, the globalists are protecting me, I'm going to stand behind the wall of the system, the protection, once they see that crack form and they're like, oh, they're going to realize they're vulnerable
Right.
because many of these people really, in fact, I think most of them know that they're doing wrong. They know they're on the wrong side. I know that not all of them do. I know that there are cops who don't know the law and they don't really understand how morality and true law is being violated. But there are many who do. There are judges who do. There are many cops who do. Many and many public officials. All judges know. All judges, in some states, like in Florida, the judges are magistrates who like they work in the office during the day and then they put a robe on at night. It's comical, really, and then you got to say Your Honor to them, and it's really amazing. But nevertheless, if you focus on and you just incessantly make sure that justice, lawful justice, comes to one person at a time, and you just take your whole organization, you focus on this person until they are lawfully held accountable for what they've done, then every other person is going to see that and go, oh my God, I'm not protected anymore. The veil has been broken, and you're going to see the system crumble. You're going to see people backing off. You're going to see well, I can't say the name, but a large company's CEO did just very recently,
Yes.
took the money and ran. You're
Yep.
going to see that kind of thing happen all across the board as soon as these people realize that the public is not going to stop until lawful justice is done. And then you're going to see a turnaround because the globalists have purchased the prosecutors and the state attorneys in virtually all the states. And they did that strategically because they know that those people decide who gets tried, who's going to go to court. That's one of the key positions. You got to control the judges, which they do, but you also have to control the prosecutors and state attorney, and they do. That's why Soros, it's just come out recently that Soros was actually funding the election or the promotion of a lot of these prosecutors in many states, and that happens all the time. So I think there's many different strategies that can take place, but that's one of them, is focusing on one person or one small group of people, and do not stop with the entire organization. Do not stop until there is justice, until there is lawful accountability, and then you're going to see other people start running because they're going to realize they're not protected by this system anymore.
Exactly. No, I agree. That's what I keep telling people. You cannot let up. And I know they're going to try to probably lower, like I know they are, at least where I live, they're dropping the mandates at the beginning of next month. And people are kind of like relaxing. I'm like, this is the time that you've really got to get on the gas. Like, don't like they're doing this for a reason. They're trying to pacify you. It's the same as the shows in the Roman days where they would throw food, bread and stuff, in the circus. I mean, they're trying to pacify the people, and I fear that it's going to work. So I try to wake people up and say you got to keep on them now because we are making a difference now, and I'm sure they're scared. I think they are scared because they realize a lot of people are waking up. But I also think that they have a contingency plan, and they always are, in my opinion, 10 steps ahead of us anyways. But I think that we rocked them a little. I hope. I want to believe that anyways.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And what you said about really now is the time to really put the pressure on, absolutely right. I've said the same thing for years, that when you start winning, that's when you crawl on and you sit on their shoulders. You do not let up. If you want to win this, you better be in it to win it because your life is at stake.
Right.
They are spraying you from the air. They're doing other things that we can't even talk about.
Exactly.
And they're doing this to you with full knowledge of what they're doing and what the consequences for your life are. These are not accidents. One of the things the EPA is trying to promote about geoengineering, I call it chemtrails. People can call it geoengineering, whatever they want to call it. Doesn't matter to me. But what the EPA is promoting as their plausible deniability is they say, oh, well, we've got some metals coming out of these jet engines, but that's just that's an unintended side effect of the additives of jet fuels.
Yeah.
And that is such a clever lie because it is in part additives, because that's not the only thing they're doing, but it's not unintended.
Right.
It is intended. When you watch, it's more complicated than people think. When you talk about the chemtrail program, it's not just, hey, we've got this set of jets that have these systems outfitted. No. You've got some jets that are like that. Many of our military, in fact, every jet I've seen spraying in my over my house, except with one exception in the last about 6 months ago, because I checked them online. You can check flights. I know you know
Right.
this, but
Yep.
your audience, you can go to Flight Radar 24. You can look at every jet. Is it commercial? Is it military? If it's military, you will not see it because they don't have commercial transponders and they can't be tracked. Which you would expect. Every single jet spraying over my house and my area has been military all these years that I've ever checked, except for one about 6 months ago. I finally saw my first commercial jet that actually had a trail. And it's
Wow.
interesting because we would have military jets going to here all the time, leaving trails, and commercial jets would fly through the same airspace and not leave trails right after. And then more military would come and leave trails, and then commercial ones would come not leaving trails. That's the way it's been for years. But recently, so what that tells me is that because you see trails not only coming out of the engines, and because you're seeing this come out of some commercial jets for years in many areas, many people have reported this with commercial jets, you also see a trail coming out of the end of the fuselage. At the end of the fuselage, you have the auxiliary power unit, which has its exhaust there, which is an engine that runs. And you will see, if you look carefully, a trail out of these jets that produce very heavy trails. With the light ones, you generally don't see this. But that APU, that unit, is burning fuel and therefore producing a trail. That is pretty good evidence that there's something in the fuel. But the kicker is that the EPA wants to say that this is an unintended side effect. Go look it up. Anybody who wants to look it up in their own literature, they're explaining these trails, unintended side effect of jet fuel additives. My contention is not unintended. It is
Right.
absolutely intentional. There is no mistake here, and this is a brand new phenomenon, brand new, between 1995 and 2000. Not completely brand new because they actually did it at Woodstock. The idea of spraying populations is not new, but the widespread global implementation began its full implementation between 1995 and 2005. That's when you really saw it in city after city after city start, and I started getting all the reports here and there of this happening.
Right.
So so anyway, I'm saying all that to say that people who don't want to get involved because you're afraid, and you might be afraid in saying, I might be targeted. What
Mm-hmm.
you need to understand is you are already targeted. You're
Exactly.
already breathing this stuff. You're already being put in line to be mandated to do certain things
Mm-hmm.
that are going to have consequences. So it's absolutely critical that you understand that you cannot be afraid. You cannot afford to be afraid anymore. You need to be actively involved, become educated, and tell the people around you, because you have no idea how much pressure just you being brave will put on other people. You
Exactly.
you will bring them, you will force them, many of them, into a place of being courageous and being ashamed that they're being paranoid, because we know they're being paranoid.
Mm-hmm.
Being quiet is what paranoid people do. Being outspoken is what courage does. Telling the truth is not easy. Difficult truths are hard to face, which is why it takes courageous people to do it. So definitely speak out, be brave, and don't be afraid to be targeted, because you should understand that you already are targeted.
Exactly. I mean, that's the perfect, and I think that's the perfect spot to end the show. You've been so gracious with your time, Russ. Yeah, time flies when we talk. Holy God. Hour and a half, like incredible. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me, and you're always welcome to come back, Russ. I enjoy our conversations, and I've learned so much. I mean, I really do, and I hope other people are too. And I think you give great advice that we do. It's time. Like, we can't be scared anymore because there's just not time anymore, and we have to start. And the more people that do get brave and start speaking out, I think they're going to realize that every voice starts adding to the group, and it does make a difference. And we saw that with the convoys. It started with one truck, and it just kept growing and growing and growing, and they don't want to see that. So I mean, I love the advice that you give. This is the time to really start making a stand and letting them know that we're done. Like, I mean, I know I'm done. The last 2 years, I'm done. I mean, I can't take any more of what they're doing in these lockdowns, and I think a lot of people are that way too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now is the time to sit on their shoulders. And I'm not talking about lawlessness, I'm talking about lawfulness.
Exactly.
Follow moral, ethical behavior. Stop the lying. Stop harmful behavior. We want constructive, government. We want government that does good for the people, that helps people, that does the right thing with limits on their power. We're giving people the freedom to make their own decisions so they can determine their own life path. So,
Exactly. We
yeah.
just want the choice. That's all we. That's what I keep. The informed and with proper knowledge too. I want to know the truth, and then I'll make my own decision. That's what I want. I think that's what everybody wants. And so I totally agree. Now let everybody know, Russ. I always like at the end of the show, I will let my guest let everybody know about your websites, where they can find you, anything that you want people to know. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. I have two primary websites. One is globalskywatch.com. That website is dedicated to chemtrails and chemtrail information and education. So feel free to go there, join. We've got a huge forum there. We let people have their own forums if they want to coordinate a group in their area. So there's a lot you can do there. And the other website is Orbis, O-R-B, like boy, Orbis Vitae, V-I-T-A-E. It means Circle of Life in Latin, orbisvitae.com. That covers everything else. We have everything from UCC code to the unspeakable things and that you can't say on certain platforms.
Right.
But we have all kinds of information there. And it's not just some silly YouTube video. I like to really focus on having doctors, specialists, scientists, really good hard-hitting information there where you can educate yourself about all kinds of subjects on orbisvitae.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Russ, for once again coming here. And you're always welcome. Anytime you want to come on, just let me know. We could talk about this, talk more about the. I like to talk next up. If I get you on again in the future, talk about what the effects of these, what they're spraying above us, what it's doing to our planet, what it's doing to us. I think that would be a great topic. And so hopefully the people watched what we talked about in our first episode interview and this one start getting educated, and then we can start talking about maybe next interview we can talk about the effects of what they're spraying on us and how we can start fighting back against that. So I think that'd be cool.
Absolutely love it. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Rusty. You have yourself a great day.
You too.
All right, take care, my friend.
You too.
Well, there we have it. Another. What an amazing interview, and what an amazing man and person I love to speak with. I've learned so much from speaking with him and chatting with him a lot, and I'm checking out his websites and stuff like that. I've learned so much, and just a man with tons of knowledge, as you can tell. And I really enjoy speaking with him, and I think that people I think they got to get their head off their phone, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm always, when I'm out by myself, I'm always when I'm sitting there, I'm checking out my phone, I'm reading, checking out videos. Granted, I'm usually researching stuff the stuff we're talking about, but I still got my head in my phone. So I really try to make an effort, and especially in the summer when the weather's great and I'm outside a lot more, to make an effort to look up, and that's what people have to start doing. That I mean, they have to start looking up and seeing that what's going on above our heads is just not normal. I mean, I know they want to try to tell you that it is, but it just isn't. I mean, I've grown up, like I said, around an airport, a smaller airport. It's not huge, but I mean, it's big enough, and it wasn't always like this with them spraying, that's for sure. And I can watch them, as I was saying to Russ. I mean, I can sit in my backyard on a sunny day, and in the morning the sun comes up, there's no clouds, and then you see the planes start going back and forth, and then they start doing they go like a checkerboard pattern, or they'll start doing vertical back and forth, and then within probably an hour or two, you got this like white film that's over the whole sky. It's not natural, that's for sure. So there is spraying going on, and I mean, there's a host of reasons. Some people say they're doing it to cool the planet down. They're spraying, as we were talking about in the interview. They're doing it for nefarious reasons. So I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything they're doing. I think they're controlling the weather. They're experimenting on us. I think they're the story. I mean, a lot of people that watch this know the deal and know what's going on, and they know that they're spraying. And the tests that people have done, people have went actually up. I was watching a documentary where people went up right behind where one was being sprayed, and they went up in another plane, and they had all their scientific gadgets and meters and stuff like that, and they went right behind it, like basically flew into the plume that was left behind, and got all the readings, and it was incredible with the results with the chemicals they were finding in this. So it's definitely something going on that I think people should start looking into. And plus, we also talked about a lot of other cool stuff about the law, and I learned something about the flags with the gold trim around them. I'm going to look into that today because I found that really interesting when he was talking about that. So great stuff, and I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed doing these interviews. I say that all the time because I love to learn and I love to hear the information that people can provide that research and can point me in the right direction in researching and stuff. So I think it's really cool. It's power. Knowledge is power. But on top of that, knowledge that's used to fight against the evil going on in the world is where true power is. I mean, you can have all this knowledge and you can have all of this understanding of what's going on in the world, but if you're keeping it in just to yourself and you're not speaking out and trying to wake other people up and show other people what's going on, then it's just wasted knowledge. I mean, you take the knowledge in and you learn about it and you understand it till you get a good grasp on it, and then you make, whatever way you can do it, whether it's doing a video like this or going on the radio or through your artwork, whatever you're good at, to fight back and get this information out there. Because as I always say, they're trying to silence good information, and they're trying to, clamp down harder and harder all the time. And anybody on YouTube understands that. Probably, that's no surprise to them, and I don't think it's a surprise to a lot of people that the the powers to be, the elite, the evil psychologists, I call them, that are running this world, these cult members that you know they're doing, they know what they're doing is bottom line. So, but just to let everybody know, okay, I'm just checking something here. So just to let everybody know that if you do enjoy my content here, enjoy these interviews, I also do 2 radio shows a week, and that is at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And I'm on 2 times a week. I'm on Saturdays in Studio B from 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. And that's my fun show. It's just a show where I talk about music and movies and have a fun discussion. I like to interact with the chat and stuff like that. So definitely check that one out. And then also on Mondays, I do a 2-hour show, and that is from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., and that's Studio A. And that's Eastern Standard Time. And that's where I do interviews, talk about the more serious topics. So if you want to check that out, that'd be very cool. As I said, it's at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. So definitely go and check it out. A lot of great hosts on there providing amazing information. Lots of great guests that all these hosts are bringing on. It's pretty much 24/7. It's running that there's shows on. So it's really cool place. A lot of great information, as I said. So check it out. I love old school radio. That's what I was raised on. I mean, I remember listening to the radio as I was growing up, and so I love that style, and it's really cool. I'm really enjoying it. So I hope you guys check it out. And I got a lot of other great videos coming up too. I mean, a lot of great interviews I've already shot and gonna post them shortly. I got another kind of like a separate thing that I do from just doing long interviews. You might have saw I did one on Meatloaf, and it's just music and bands that have rocked my world, is what I call it. These are bands and music that, as I was growing up, and even now, if they just blew me away at the time and really shaped my whole journey into discovering different types of heavy metal and hard rock and rock. So I'm going to be trying to do one of those videos like once a week. I'll do it with a different band, and I'll give you the story about how I found out about the band, how I was introduced to them, and some stories about why I like their music and stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed the Meatloaf one. It was a lot of fun to do that because that was a big album when I was growing up. As I said in that little, I'm trying to keep them short too, like down to cause I know my interviews get long. From day one, they've been like 2 hours ever since I started doing them. My first video with Catherine, I just do long interviews. So I thank you guys for actually taking the time to sit back and spend a couple hours. And I think it's great topics, and I think it's stuff that is worth learning or looking at. So uh, I'm trying to make the music ones like 10 or 15 minutes. I just want to make them quick and give you guys a little overview of the music that I like in the band. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you guys join me for that. Maybe I'll end up talking about a band that that you guys like and that you like. So if you have any suggestions for a band that you would like me to talk about, within reason. I mean, don't go and give me something crazy like opera or something like that, because I don't listen to that. But anything that's rock, heavy metal, even rap, some I guess you'd call it grunge or whatever, and all these type of bands, definitely give me put a comment in, let me know, and if I have an album by that band and I do like them, I'll definitely do a review on it. I think that'd be really cool. So I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm enjoying myself. So, and if you do want to suggest any topics or anything like that you would like to talk about, or anything like that, you have a cool story that you would like to come on and talk about, like maybe a paranormal experience or something to do, I guess I was going to say Bigfoot, but I guess you could label that as paranormal too. But anything to do with like UFOs or ghosts or anything like that, send me an email, binthinkingpodcast@gmail.com, and just shoot me an email and tell me your story. And, if it has something to do with the paranormal or the occult or anything like that, if you want to talk about what's going on in the world even, or how it's affected you and you want to tell your story, shoot me an email, binthinkingpodcast@gmail.com, and just let me know what you're thinking, and maybe we can get you on the show. So, enough talking for me, though. So I'm just going to let you guys go. You guys have a great day, a great evening. As I always say, where you guys, it depends where you're living. Time zones always mess me up. So just stay safe, look after each other, and remember, everybody's got a cool story to tell. And what makes it cool is that it's your unique story. And that is what makes it interesting to me. Take care, guys. Have yourself a great day, great evening, and I'll see you soon. Peace, guys.
Are you interested in the paranormal? Murder mysteries, cryptocurrency, and thought-provoking interviews? Then check out Crypt Rick's I've Been Thinking on YouTube, or every Monday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Studio A at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Welcome to the Crypt.